Don't touch me. If you're here to use me too, then just leave. Elsie May spoke before she lifted her head. Her voice came out rough, scraped thin by fear and years of learning when silence was safer than hope. She was bent forward over a low wooden table in an open Wyoming field, wrists tied, ankles bound, dress pulled out of place by hands that never asked. The wood beneath her burned from the sun. The ropes cut deeper with every breath. It was the late 1880s in Wyoming Territory, where men called cruelty discipline and neighbors called it family business. Out here, a man's land was his kingdom, and what happened behind his fences was nobody else's concern. Elsie's legs trembled, not from weakness, but from knowing exactly what usually came next. Behind her, Virgil May moved slowly, deliberately. He enjoyed the waiting. To him, control was proof of ownership, and ownership was proof of worth. A hired hand stood nearby, eyes fixed on the dirt, pretending he was somewhere else. A woman from the neighboring ranch whispered once, then fell silent. No one stepped in. No one ever did. Elsie swallowed and forced the words out again, quieter now. Don't take advantage. Please. Don't. She waited for laughter. For rough hands. For pain. Instead, there was silence. A long shadow stretched across the field, still and unmoving. Hooves stood quiet near the fence line. Elsie turned her head just enough to see him. A man sat on horseback, older, broad-shouldered, his beard streaked with gray. His eyes were fixed on her, not hungry, not curious, but sharp with something she couldn't name. Thomas Granger had stopped without planning to. He'd been riding toward Laramie, mind on the road, when he saw the table, the ropes, and the way the girl held herself like someone bracing for a blow she'd learned by heart. Medicine Bow lay west of town. A lonely stretch of land. Easy to hide things there. Thomas didn't speak. He only watched. Elsie misunderstood the stillness. She always did. Her breath hitched. If you're thinking about it, don't. Please. I'm not worth it. The words hurt worse than the rope. Years of being used had taught her that help always came with a price. Virgil finally noticed the stranger. He turned, irritation flashing across his face. This is family business, he snapped. Thomas said nothing. His jaw tightened. His eyes never left Elsie. For a moment, the world held its breath. Flies buzzed. Grass swayed. Then Thomas turned his horse and rode toward town without a word. Elsie felt something crack inside her chest. Hope, maybe. Or fear. She didn't know whether that man was leaving her to her fate, or whether he was about to bring something far worse down on her head. Thomas Granger didn't ride far before the anger caught up with him. Dust followed his horse all the way toward Laramie, hanging in the air like it had something to say. He kept his eyes forward, but the image wouldn't leave him, the ropes, the table, the way the girl spoke like mercy was just another kind of danger. He'd heard that tone before. Years ago. Back when he wore a badge and people told him which side he was supposed to be on. Thomas was 48 now. Bones stiff. Beard gray. Tired in a way sleep never fixed. He'd walked away from law work after burying 2 partners and one mistake he never talked about. Since then, he hauled freight when it paid, rode point for cattle drives, and kept his head down. But some things didn't stay buried. By the time he reached town, his jaw ached from being clenched too long. Laramie buzzed with summer noise, boots on boardwalks, laughter spilling from the saloon. Thomas stepped into the sheriff's office without knocking. Sheriff Amos Klein looked up through the smoke. "You look like hell," Klein said. "Seen something worse," Thomas replied. He told it straight. No drama. No guessing. A girl bound on a ranch near Medicine Bow. Witnesses who wouldn't speak unless someone stood first. Klein listened, tapping ash into a tin. When Thomas finished, the sheriff leaned back and sighed. "You sure you want back in this kind of mess?" "She didn't ask for it," Thomas said. That was the line that landed. Klein nodded once and reached for his ledger, then hesitated. Paper meant responsibility. Responsibility made enemies. He called in Deputy Carl Briggs to take notes. Briggs entered smiling. Too casual. When Thomas mentioned the ranch, Briggs's eyes flicked away for half a second. Thomas noticed. He always did. "Family business," Briggs muttered. "That's what people say when they want it to keep happening," Thomas replied. The room went quiet. Outside, a church bell rang the hour. "We'll need a warrant," Klein said. "And witnesses willing to stand. And a justice of the peace willing to sign." "I'll stand," Thomas said. Briggs watched him with a look that didn't sit right. Thomas didn't sleep much that night. He lay on a narrow cot behind the livery, boots still on, staring at the ceiling like it might offer answers. Morning came hot and bright. Coffee tasted like dust. By noon, Thomas had a short list of names. A woman who traded eggs with Virgil's ranch, a ranch hand who quit limping last spring, and a feed boy who came back pale as chalk. He took the names to Sheriff Klein. Deputy Briggs laughed outside with a man from the saloon like the world was simple. Klein shut the office door. "Get me one witness on record today," he said, "and I'll sign." "I'm getting her out long enough to speak," Thomas replied. Thomas planned like a man who'd buried friends. "First, Doc Pierce at the clinic." "If she comes in," Thomas said, "will you write it down?" "I write down everything," the doctor replied. "That's how I stay alive." Next, Reverend Cole. Churches kept records. People talked to preachers when they wouldn't talk to sheriffs. By late afternoon, Thomas and the Reverend rode toward Medicine Bow. Virgil met them at the gate. Deputy Briggs stood beside him, smiling. Thomas felt his blood go cold. They asked to see Elsie. She came out slow, eyes down, smaller than she had in the field, not because she was small, but because she'd been trained to fold herself up. "Doc Pierce wants to look at your wrist," Thomas said gently. Virgil's hand tightened on her arm. "She's fine." "I'm not fine," Elsie whispered. That single sentence cracked the dam. Briggs cleared his throat. "Sheriff doesn't need to hear family squabbles." Thomas knew then, Briggs was riding ahead. The warrant was signed by lantern light. They rode at dawn. Virgil stood on the porch with a rifle, smiling. Sheriff Klein read the warrant aloud. Virgil laughed, then grabbed Elsie and tried to drag her inside. Thomas moved fast. He caught Virgil's wrist and shoved him back. Virgil swung first. It wasn't pretty. Just two men in the dirt. Elsie watched, stunned, as someone finally stood between her and that door. "Don't," Sheriff Klein said, leveling his gun. Virgil hesitated. Briggs tried to talk. Klein shut him down. Badges lost their shine fast that morning. Virgil faced consequences, not enough, but some. Briggs lost his badge. Elsie left Wyoming for a place where the sky felt wider and the rope stayed on saddles. Thomas never heard where she went. But he liked to believe she found peace. Because sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to look away. If you saw what Thomas saw, would you speak up? Or would you tell yourself it wasn't your business?